Thanks for coming along to my little chat this afternoon. I'd like to point out this is a complete kind of reworking of this talk, and so I am 100% open to any feedback you have afterwards of things that I explained really badly and so it didn't come across. Okay, so absolutely after this, this is a feedback loop, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I want to talk about effective DevOps metrics. There's loads of DevOps metrics out there, right? We're flooded with them. But how can we keep them healthy? Because the most common thing that comes up when it comes to metrics is people are using them in ways that make people behave in odd ways, right? If you're being measured on something individually, you start optimizing for that thing, very often at the cost of things that your organization really needs. I worked on a project once where we were trying to get a finance system delivered into production after a long test. And the key developer that we really needed to be involved was writing a little wiki article because in a week's time he had his performance review, and his bonus depended on him hitting a number of wiki articles internally, right? So he's throwing the whole organization under the bus because he needs to get his bonus. And you can't blame him. That's exactly what I would have done as well. So this is the rough outline for the agenda for today, but it's going to be kind of fluid. We're going to talk a bit about how metrics have been impacted by our history as software developers. And I'm going to give a very oversimplified version of the history of software delivery in 3 stages. But it kind of explains how we've changed about how we think about our work. We're then going to talk a bit about established metric frameworks that you may have even heard of. And then we'll plot a pathway. How do we get through all of that? Because the answer can't be like a giant Excel spreadsheet where we track every number in the world. And then there'll be some time for questions as well. So, who am I and why am I standing in front of you talking about this stuff? My name's Steve, and I work at Octopus Deploy. And I'm the principal DevEx researcher there. I'm involved with foundation projects like the Continuous Delivery Foundation and the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And I'm also a DORA community guide. And DORA is the organization, if you were in the previous talk, it got a mention. It was founded by Dr. Nicole Forsgren and has since been acquired by Google Cloud, but is still continuing the same work. So I work really closely across a whole bunch of different research projects that are being taken by these foundations and by these organizations. And I'm lucky enough to get some influence about the content of those reports, which is kind of nice because I can be curious about things and then just keep asking until they get sick of me and then put a question into the survey. So, yes. So this is my simplified model, right? Some of you, depending on how old you are, may recognize some of these different eras in software delivery. So if we go back a fair bit, it's the heavyweight era. People often say waterfall for this. And I think probably, I would say phased software delivery is probably how I'd describe it. And there were lots of different flavors. There was Waterfall was Winston Royce. There was also Bennington had one that came out of the Sage project. And the idea was, it was like, here are a whole bunch of stages that we have to pass through. And very often, if you've seen the full version of Winston Royce's diagram, so there's a nice waterfall version of it, but then there's one with all of the documents that you need to progress between those steps, right? It's like, what they really valued in this era was activity. Okay, and if you ever got thrown into the maturity model zone here, there would be people like saying, well, you're a level 2, and if you produce these additional documents as part of your work, then you can go to level 3. And you're like, and what changes for our actual software or for our users? I was like, no, nothing, but you get to level 3, and then there's 2 more levels after that. So that's the heavyweight era. So it's all about activity. We then move into the lightweight era, which is agile. And lean was in there as well. Not picking any specific frameworks in here. It was definitely better. I don't think anyone wanted to go back to the previous way of doing it. But there were some phrases that were bundled into this. This is probably the most famous one: twice the work in half the time, right? It was about speed, right? So it was like, get ready, we're about to go, right? Like, how much can we do in a short time? And we got a little bit myopic about speed. Like, how many features can we get out in a short amount of time? Let's count those. Number of things, right? Like, usually features or changes or points, right? So So it was a bit speed focused. And I think we're now moving into a new era. We'll call it the modern era. We'll regret that in 10 years' time because it won't be. It'll be old school. But this is where we're a bit more user-centric now. We understand that 20 features doesn't really mean anything, but a user who's like, I love using this piece of software, that's a kind of cool thing to have because they'll pay for it. So it's a slightly different way of doing things. And instead of measuring activity or speed, we're now looking more at outcomes. So someone had a problem, have we managed to solve that problem? Or like, are we making money? Things like that. It's those kinds of questions now. So instead of it just being about these counts of things, we're trying to tie it back to something real that is meaningful. So that's my oversimplified version. Okay, it's a lot messier than that in real life, as we've all experienced. Every time an external trainer comes in and then tells us what the new thing is, and we're like, is it? That's confusing. So this is really what the talk is about. How do we measure software delivery in this modern era? And there's loads of different options for this. We've got the DORA 4 keys. We've got the space framework. We've got DX core. There's lots of different ways of measuring this stuff. Okay, and if you start looking at the individual metrics, there's hundreds of them, right? We can't possibly measure all of that. So we need to change the question a little bit. And the adjusted question is, why do we measure software delivery in the modern era? And if you were in the keynote this morning, this is the thing that changes your metrics into signals. You have to think, if I measure this particular number and that number goes up, what would I do to respond to that? Or if the number goes down, what would I do to respond to that? And if the answer is, I wouldn't really change anything, you definitely don't need to measure it, okay? Because it's not giving you any meaningful signal. So we need to think about why we're measuring stuff, and then the slightly related question, which is, how will people behave when we measure this? And that's the one that I think often gets missed, especially when there are some famous consulting companies that are talking about developer productivity at the moment. And some of the metrics they're suggesting may in fact cause unintended side effects, because as soon as you start measuring an individual developer score, they're going to start optimizing for their own personal score, right? So maybe if you need help, I'm going to be a bit busy because I've got my own number to hit, right? So maybe I'm not going to do some of the glue work that's vital to successful teams because I'm kind of like got to make sure that I get, you start worrying about being stack ranked. Am I going to be in the bottom 20%? I don't want to get chucked out. So yeah, we need to think about other motivations. Once we do that, we can then use some steps, a little pathway that's going to take us. Firstly, we're going to back up away from some of the things we might be doing, and then we're going to try and find a simple way forward. And this is not a maturity model. We've put levels on here, but please don't treat it like a maturity model. And and it's got 5 levels as well, which they all do, right? Because we've got 5 fingers, as Nicole Forsgren says. So the first thing you have to do is work out if you've got metrics that are actually causing strange behaviors, okay? So I don't think anyone is counting lines of code anymore. But at one point we thought that was a great idea and we were doing it. So things like that, we want to remove those. And then we can get into the simplest metrics that we can collect. And the DORA 4 keys are going to give us that. We call it software delivery performance. And the idea behind those is they're so easy to collect. You can just do it as a survey, or you can just say, how often have we deployed this month, right? You don't have to instrument it and get it into all of your systems. You can just be kind of casual about it to get the first taste. The precision of these numbers matters a lot less as your performance increases, because once you're deploying on demand, you're saying the precision that matters. On demand, is that once every 3 hours or once every 2 hours? It's well, at this point, it probably doesn't matter. But if it's once every 6 months versus once every month, that's a more meaningful amount. And then we can start adding in some of these other ideas. So DX Core and the product that DX offer is all around the developer satisfaction area. Now, sounds fluffy and hey, come on everyone, don't we want to be happy when we're at work? And there is an element of that, because we're going to be at work a lot, so it should be like enjoyable to some extent. But more importantly, when we have happy developers, we tend to have more successful products. And that means we can get more money in the bank or solve more problems or whatever our goal is as an organization. So you can be a hard-nosed businessman about this and go, I want my developers to be happy because I want to be rich. And we can then move into further, and these will be ones that you will make more decisions on depending on what your needs are, into reliability, like are you meeting your SLOs? And outcomes, like we changed our shopping checkout process to try and reduce abandoned baskets. Did we manage to do that, right? It's very context specific. If you're not working on e-commerce, that probably shouldn't be something you measure. And then we can start going into that whole wider value stream, from someone having an idea all the way through to the idea having an impact on the world, right? Hey, could we save the bees? And then we do a load of stuff, and then the bees are all saved. That's where we want to get to. So that's the basic map for it all. And the reason I start with the DORA metrics isn't just because I'm a DORA community guide. It's because they have this brilliant spot in the middle of this diagram. This is the DORA core model, which is a smaller version of all of the things that have been learned in the research that are the most confident findings. They've been replicated more than once in the research. And these measures here, the 4 keys, they tell you a lot about whether you're doing good things over here on the left. So there's a whole bunch of capabilities over here. Some of those are technical, like are developers writing tests? And some of them are cultural, like can you actually say, I think this could go terribly wrong, boss? And they go, oh, thanks for letting me know, rather than get help. Okay, that's an important part of this. So there's a whole bunch of capabilities that these numbers tell you whether you're doing the right set of things. So they're kind of like, they're a lagging indicator that you're doing good things as a software team. But they're also a leading indicator of these cool things, making money, saving bees, right? All the things that we want to do. So they kind of have that dual purpose. They look back a little bit, we are doing a good set of practices, and they look forward, we're making money. So that's why I think they're a really good place to start. And you would have seen on the previous slide, I mentioned reliability. They're in here as well. So they have a relationship. And these arrows are very simplified, very tiny as well. But these arrows in real life, there's like, it's like spaghetti. It's like this specific capability seems to have an impact on this specific metric or these two, and it's like really complex. But this model's brilliant because it's like, you just move that way. Do these things here, these things get better, and then those things get better as well. And these also will change earlier. So when you start improving your software delivery, these will tell you earlier than this will tell you. So you don't have to wait for your finance team to release your company accounts before you know whether or not your efforts have paid off, right? You get a little signal. Yes, you're deploying more frequently. That's a good thing. You're likely to make more money. So now to the warning. Probably the most common problem we have with these metrics, and it comes up in the community discussions all the time, is that people say, great, so we've got 5 teams. We can create a league table with these metrics and say which teams are good and which teams are bad, right? It's like, please don't do that. We don't want to use them at the line of business level. We don't want to use them at the organizational level. We definitely don't want to do it to compare individuals. Like, what are your DORA metrics? That's like my personal ones. What? But these are things that people do, right? It's like, it sounds funny, and then you find a company doing it, and everyone looks kind of sad. So what we do want to do is do it at the application level, right? Because it really is telling you the performance of that component. And you're likely to have some components that are like, we can deploy that all day long, no problem. And you'll have other components which are like, don't touch that. So it helps you to identify that. And the best way is to compare that performance over time. Is it getting better? That's more important. And in the recent report, that was highlighted. We don't want to aim for elite performance, like the top performance level. We want elite improvement. We want to be really good at improving. And I think DORA's motto at the moment is like, we want to help people get better at getting better, which I really love. Nathan Harvey says that all the time, and every time I still think, yes. So, we also have another problem with these metrics, which is visualizing them and sharing them with other people. Again, this is another really common problem that comes up, is people are like, we start collecting the DORA metrics, we found a tool that does it, we've got a really cool dashboard, so we send that up to the C-suite so they can see how great we're doing, right? And it's like, it then sets this expectation. The C-suite are like, well, now we can see the number, we care about it. Like, we didn't care about it before, but now, right? Why isn't that number here? Why isn't that number here? And you start ending up having behavioral changes that you didn't anticipate. When you put something on a dashboard and make it visible, people kind of think it's important. So the other thing you'll find is, if you have a dashboard and there are 4 numbers on it, any other number in the world doesn't matter anymore because there's a dashboard with 4 numbers on it. So you're signaling to people what's important, right? So like if you had a graph that said, like, have you been nice to everyone today? Everyone would be like, really nice, be great. They wouldn't do anything else because that's the one metric they can see, so they can take action on it. So we want to be careful about elevation, sending those metrics up too high in the organization where they don't matter. There are metrics that you probably do want to give to those people, but just different ones, right? So like when you're looking at developing a product, you want to be talking about the product's performance, not the team's performance, right? It's like, are we hitting the transaction rate we need, or whatever it is that your product does. And yeah, just choose carefully what you make visible and change it, right? With dashboards, you'll put graphs on it, it'll look really cool, and then you'll be like, I don't want to remove that one because it's a really nice, colorful chart, right? But when it's not the important thing anymore, it's not the thing you should be focusing on, you have to just ditch it off and then put on the new thing, right? So like if you're trying to encourage people to adopt TDD, for example, you might want to have something which shows your progress on that. But then once everyone's like, boom, we're all there, we've done it, remove it, put your next initiative up. So keep it evolving. So how do we avoid this? And this is a little framework. Now the actual metrics, you don't have to use these. Use the kind of slots that are available here to make your decisions. So the idea behind this is the stuff that you want to track like forever. And if you've done observability and monitoring and things like this, you kind of, even though CPU may not be important after a while, you still want to track it because you might want to have a quick check, right? So there's stuff that you want to track over the long term. You're always going to measure that. There's then stuff that is basically running in the background. And this is where you're still collecting the numbers, but you're not really focusing on it. You just need to know if something's happened that's a bit weird, right? So, for example, over here, like your queue times, you might want to look at that all the time. But if your queue time starts nudging over 2 hours, maybe you want to know about that, right? So they're being collected, but they're not being displayed prominently. And then there's temporary stuff. So your product owner has said, we need to achieve this goal. You might want to track that and make it very visible whilst you're progressing towards that goal. And then when you're done with it, you either throw it away because you don't need it anymore, or you think, yeah, let's track that in the background so we know if we've like regressed. So like here with abandoned baskets, you might have reduced your abandoned basket rate to a level that you wanted to achieve. If you use impact mapping, you've landed your impact map. And now you might say, just let me know if that starts climbing up again so that we can revisit it, because you might make some other change that makes people start abandoning baskets again. So that's the different temporal nature of them. And then you've got your internal and elevated metrics. And this is super important because most metrics should probably be down here. Okay, so you're working on an application, you need that feedback from these numbers to help you improve your development process. But you don't need to necessarily publish them to other people. That's a decision to make. So you should be very conscious about what happens when you move something above that red dotted line, which is why I made it a red dotted line. That's like visual indicator. And you might argue some of these, like reliability, maybe you do publish that, right? Maybe even as far as to customers. But that's the decision that you make, right, about what you're showing people. If you're publishing reliability, everyone's expecting you to hit some kind of number for that. You're creating an expectation. And you have to make sure that what everyone does to maintain that reliability number remains what you expect. Because sometimes in the past, we had to try and achieve this by not doing any of this. Okay, so there's that interplay there. So hopefully that model makes sense. It's pretty simple. You've just got those 3 different timescales for metrics, and you've got the above or the below the line. And you can overlay space framework on this. If you want to use the space metrics, there's a whole bunch of ideas that you can use to track different types of things. You can overlay that on here, and you can say, well, we might be doing an activity measure, like how many pull requests we process in a week, but we keep it down here, right? We just need to know that. Or like how long it takes for different people to get their pull request approved. Like, why am mine taking so long? Right? So yeah, just make decisions as you go. And then the final note is, like, I talk about metrics a lot, so I always like to bring this back up. This is really what we should be aiming for. So we don't want to do twice the work in half the time, which is kind of the famous quote. We want to have twice the impact with half the work, right? If we can not do work, that's a better saving than doing it a lot faster. So that's where we're aiming for. And the way we do that is we need to get closer to our users, understand their problems, hopefully have more regular conversations with them so that we can actually choose the right things to work on. That's really the sweet spot. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of, there's a big gap basically opening up. Everyone's now realized the door of 4 keys, right? We want throughput, we want stability, yes, we're gonna do it, but that's being wasted when you're just a feature factory and you're just like, yes, we're done, right? It's almost better to slow down and make sure the things you're doing are going to really impact the users. And this chart came from the recent report. And this is showing product performance. So how people think of your product. Is your product good or not? And this is the really interesting thing. So you've got throughput along the bottom. This is like fast, right? But if you actually are listening to your users, you're getting the highest level of product performance no matter the speed at which you are moving. So even with the lowest delivery throughput, the least, like this is like slow deployment, we're like deployment frequency, we should be deploying faster, right, more often. It's like, well, yeah, there are benefits to that because you can see for this yellow line, the more often they deploy, right, it's actually, yes, they are performing better, but they're still being beaten by teams that actually speak to users, right? So you're like scoring 9 almost all the way across there if you're talking to your users, whereas the only way to do it if you don't listen to users is develop lots of features and some of them will work, right? So if we do it faster, there will be more that work. There's also a lot more that don't work, and like, what do we do with those? We have to maintain them. It's kind of generally bad news. So yeah, this is like the big epiphany from the latest report is if you actually listen to your users, you can you can deliver a product that works for them. It just sounds obvious when you say it, right? So if you're interested in more conversations around this, Dora.community, we talk about this stuff all the time, right? So come along, pose your questions, join the discussion. We have regular meetups. We have a session called Metric Mondays where we just talk about metrics, right? So like, not everyone's gonna be excited by that. This guy.